when it comes to using the skill of saying no, we have a huge emotional obstacle to overcome if we are going to be able to use our no to protect our yes. And that obstacle is this: is it selfish to say no to other people? Hi everybody, this is Greg from Heart Tools, where we make it simple to build great relationships. And if you are going to embrace your yes and live the life that you're uniquely designed to live, that comes out of your values, your purpose, your vision, your hopes and dreams, you're going to have to overcome this emotional obstacle that a lot of us have in the back of our minds, that it's very selfish to say no to other people. And because I'm a pastor, the way I hear this a lot is, yeah, but Greg, Jesus was selfless and he was sacrificial, and so that's how we should be. After all, Jesus died on the cross for me and sacrificed his life. You know, who am I not to sacrifice 2 hours to babysit my sister's kids? So let's deal first with the idea that Jesus was selfless. Actually, if you look at the Gospels, what you discover is Jesus had a very strong no muscle. He said no all the time. He said no to the people who wanted to make him king and march against Rome and, raise up an army. He said no to the Pharisees who wanted him to follow their religious traditions. He said no to 5,000 people when he fed them one day. Remember that story? And they all followed him and said, hey, why don't you just feed us all the time? That sounds good. He says, no, I'm not going to do that. Jesus had a strong no muscle because he was not selfless. Actually, Jesus had a very strong sense of who he was, what his purpose was, what his vision and values were, and he followed them and said yes to them, even when that meant saying no to other people. And one of the primary leaders in the early church, the Apostle Paul, had a fascinating phrase that I think really helps us with this idea that it's selfish to say no to other people. And we apply this phrase a lot towards money, but I think it's helpful for any resources that we would give to other people. Paul says this, he says, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly and not under compulsion. So don't give something reluctantly. Don't give something if you just really don't want to give it. And don't give it under compulsion. Don't give it because you think you have to give it and you're a bad person if you don't give it. Not reluctantly or under compulsion, because God loves a cheerful giver. When you do give something to someone, and even when you sacrifice something to someone, the best way to do that, Paul says, is not reluctantly, not under compulsion. Wait until your heart says, you know what, I really want to give this. This is something I want to give. And so I think it's important for us to understand what we can sacrifice and what we cannot sacrifice. We can sacrifice resources. We can sacrifice our time. We can sacrifice our money. We can sacrifice our energy. We can sacrifice our status and give up our status and position. We can even sacrifice our lives, and people do that all the time, and that can be a good thing to do. But what you can't sacrifice is your sense of self. You can't sacrifice who you are. You can't sacrifice your purpose and your values, right? And so when we do sacrifice, what's important for us to see is we don't sacrifice our yes for someone else's yes. Where, boy, I really want to do this with my life, but this person wants this time or energy or money, and so I'll just give that. We don't sacrifice our yes for someone else's yes. What we sacrifice is we sacrifice a lesser yes for a higher yes. There are things I'm going to give up that I'd like to say yes to because there's a higher yes, right? And so when there's someone in the military on the battlefield, they don't give up their life because their life doesn't matter. What they're doing is they're saying there's something of higher value that I'm giving up my life for. And so it may be protecting freedom for them. It may be protecting their country. It may be protecting the men and women that they serve with, right? But there's a higher yes that makes that sacrifice worth it. And this is actually the way Jesus sacrificed as well. The writer of Hebrews has this interesting phrase when he says, for the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross. right? He didn't go to the cross because he was selfless. He didn't go to the cross because he had to. He did it because there was a higher value for him. So the idea of redeeming mankind and spending eternity with you was more important to him than avoiding, this crushing experience of going through death for the joy set before him. And so if you sit back and think about it, here's what I think you'll discover is that a selfish person is not a person who uses their no to protect their yes. I know a lot of people with very strong no muscles because they have very strong yeses, and they're extremely generous people. What a selfish person is a selfish person is someone who doesn't understand why someone else gets a no, right? That's when you can tell a selfish person, when they're saying, wait, nobody gets to say no to me. That is selfish. And so here's a simple step I would invite you to practice in order to get better at saying no in order to protect your yes. And that is, create some phrases that will create space between when someone asks for something and when you say yes or no. And those simple phrases can be things like, let me think about that for a bit. Let me talk to my spouse. Let me talk to my boss. Let me talk to my team. Hey, let me look at my calendar. Let me look at my schedule. Let me look at my budget, right? Whatever you need to do, try to lengthen the time between when someone asks and when you say yes or no. And in that space, do two things. The first is continue practicing what we talked about in the last video, which is ask yourself, do I have the resources to say yes without sacrificing my yes? And the second thing I want you to start thinking about is this something I can say yes to cheerfully, right? Can I say, yeah, I want to give this time, this money, this energy, whatever. I can do this cheerfully. I want to do this. If not, if it's something reluctant, if it's something under compulsion, it's probably taking you away from your yes. So do that simple step, and I think you'll be amazed at how helpful that can be at helping you say no in order to protect your yes. Simple steps, practice, practice, practice. That's what Heart Tools is all about.